Hey everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, that is Tim. We talk about horror movies on this show, and in this episode, we are finally returning to one of the franchises that we started a while ago. We are going to talk about Scream 2. We did Scream 1 last October. It's been like 6 months to
Yeah.
Scream 1.
Yeah, I yesterday when I watched I asked my wife. I was like, "Hey, you want to watch Scream 2 tonight?" And she's like, "Oh, sure, but I don't think I saw the first one." I was like, "No, you did. We just watched it like a long time ago."
Yeah, we're rotating through so many franchises that I think February, March, we had a lot of like 2018 catch up to do. That kind of slowed us down. We've only just recently started getting back to sequels, but Scream 2. So I saw Scream 1 soonish after it came out. If I remember correctly, I saw Scream 2 when it hit pay-per-view at the time. Because I remember like, because back listen up kiddies, back in the late 90s, when something hit pay-per-view, you had to like put in your 4-digit PIN to purchase it through your cable provider, and then you got the movie at whatever showtime it was playing at, because it wasn't like on demand at the time. It was like a channel that you unlocked for the 2 hours or so that it was playing. That was how it worked. But I remember watching that.
When did do you have the dates on when the first one and this one came out? What year?
The first one was 96. This one was 97.
Okay, so because oh wow, I didn't realize they were so close. Let's see, 96, I would have been 10, so I don't think I would have been able to see this in theaters.
It's worth mentioning though, the second one was like it was like December 97, like it was right at the end.
Okay. Yeah, because I feel like I saw the first one, like maybe I rented it at like a cousin's house or something, because I remember like, them explaining the plot to me, and then I don't know if this is true, but my cousin said like after she watched the first movie, someone called her up and was doing the Scream voice and asking her like, her favorite scary movie and stuff, and that made me like really scared to watch it, because I'm like, oh, is that gonna happen to me? Like,
worth mentioning, when this came out, like I was what, like 8, 9, something like that. You were maybe 10, like 11.
I would have been 10 with the first one, 11 with the second one. Then
Right. I like. Yeah, it would have been 1998 when I saw this, and I think I saw the first one not long before I saw the second one. I think I saw the second one like early 98, and then I saw the second one when I hit pay-per-view, and I liked the first one at the time, and obviously we talked about the first one in October. I quite liked it. Oh, we'll start spoiler free, by the way. We'll give you a warning in the middle before we go into spoilers, just for the record. But I liked the first one. I thought it did a lot of interesting things. Rewatching it recently, I still feel that way. I think it's got a lot of smart things going for it. But obviously, it was really successful. It kind of rejuvenated the slasher movie for the 90s. It sort of recreated what the slasher movie was. We had a lot of knockoffs. We had, I Know What We Did Last Summer. We had Urban Legend. We had all these different things. So naturally, Scream was going to get a sequel. Wes Craven came back. Kevin Williamson, the writer, came back, and I think the promise was is that they would use this to explore the idea of what the sequel tropes were. Like, because the first film did a lot with, okay, this is what a slasher movie is and how it functions, and we're going to play with that. This movie, at least on theory, is going to be playing with what a sequel is and how sequels up the ante, how sequels maybe twist things around from the first one, all that kind of stuff. And it gets super meta, because one of the plot elements in this is that there was a movie made in the film based on the book that Gail wrote about the first film. So there's like this film called Stab, where we have like Heather Graham playing like a small role as the Drew Barrymore of the Stab movie, and we see Luke Wilson playing like the Billy in the movie, and so on. But so this movie comes out, and the plot of Scream 2 is we're at a college campus now where Sydney is. Randy's also there. And then because those murders start up, both Gail and Dewey show up. So we get like all of our surviving characters more or less are back, and we have some new characters, and murders happen, sequel references are made, and we'll get into more of it as we go. But so watching this again, maybe you can answer this sort of as a twofer here. How did you feel about Scream 2 back in the day when you first saw it, and how did you feel about it watching it now that presumably it's been some time since you've seen it, because
Yeah, yeah, because I like the Scream movies, but it's not a franchise that I revisit often. You know, like your Fridays or your Nightmares or whatever. Honestly, I'm not sure how I remember when I first saw it. I think I did like it when I first saw it. Rewatching it now, I would say that I do like it, but again, I don't love it. I think there are some people that are hardcore into this movie. Like yeah, yeah, I've seen like film Twitter and horror Twitter and stuff talk about before, and some people even saying it's like better than the first one, and I definitely wouldn't go that far. I do think it is actually a really good idea to make a sequel to Scream, just because of the meta nature of it, that exploring like making a very meta movie exploring like the idea of sequels is very interesting. But I don't know, I feel like they don't really go as far with it as I want them to. Like it kind of seems like to me it kind of feels like it's kind of dropped a little bit in the middle, and it just kind of turned into a more or just a regular kind of slasher thing. um but I don't know. It's like there's some stuff that I kind of having like a little trouble deciding if um like, okay, this thing is stupid, but is it stupid on purpose? Like, are they trying to make a comment on like, oh no, this is big and dumb and over the top, but that's because that's what sequels are, and like that's because a lot of times sequels will make these leaps in logic and be kind of dumb. So it's kind of hard for me to really say like, all right, I don't like this thing, but is it actually kind of smart because it's making like a commentary on that? You know what I mean?
It's yeah, it's hard to say because there's definitely it's like does it excuse it when like because I feel like the big thing I'll compare these movies to in a lot of ways is Cabin in the Woods which I would argue outstreamed Scream if that makes
Oh yeah,
sense.
yeah. I think like for a long, long time, like Scream was like the champion of like the meta horror movie, and then I definitely think Cabin outdid it. But yeah.
Yeah, because I think that I have almost nothing to fault in Cabin in the Woods. Whereas Scream, I think sometimes kind of it walks this fine line of wanting to still be a proper horror movie, but also being the meta movie. And there's certain things where you're like, okay, do I forgive this because it's trying to be meta? But if it doesn't feel that way in the script, where you're watching it, and you're just like, no, this just feels like the trope. I feel like
Yeah.
just even though you're pointing out you're doing the trope, if you're still just doing the trope, you're not really like making it any more
Right.
entertaining. Just because
Yeah.
there's a wink wink on it doesn't necessarily fix it on its own.
Yeah.
It's kind
Definitely.
of Scream 2 for me. Like I think Scream 2 is a decent sequel. I think there's a couple of things that hold it back for me. One is, and I didn't ever realize this until I watched it again, is that it's full 2 hours long. This movie is
It's
long for what it is, and
yeah.
I think there's like several elements of this you could cut down considerably. Like all
Sure.
and I get what it's doing here with like Sydney being like an actor now, and she's like in the theater, and like we use the theater set a lot, especially in the third act.
Jeez, I really don't like this whole subplot.
Oh yeah, see, there's a scene in the middle of the movie where she's like rehearsing the play, and like she starts to get scared in the middle of it, and like we're getting all these shots of like people with the fake knives, and it's like, is one of them really the killer kind
It's
of thing?
well, it's insane because like the play or whatever involves like masked people with knives going to stab this character, and it's like of course she's gonna freak out about it. Like you know, she like all of her friends died by like getting stabbed by this dude in a mask, and she's it's crazy to me that she would like be okay with doing that.
Yeah, it's nuts. And I mean, I like seeing David Warner, who's like our
Oh yeah,
teacher,
he's great.
because you might know him from the hit film Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Secret of the Ooze.
It's true.
Also, Star
I
Trek
always
5 and 6. Also.
sure. uh, no, I actually forget. Like, there's like a lot of like recognizable people in this.
Oh,
Like
sure, tons
both,
of them.
and it's funny because there's people that are like recognizable from the '90s that you don't see as much anymore. But then there's also a lot of people that you wouldn't have recognized back then, but recognize now.
Sure, yeah. Because the movie does the same thing as the first one, where it starts off with like someone who's. Oh, that's the thing. I'm not even sure how. Like, was Jada Pinkett Smith? Because this was before she was married to Will Smith as well. I'm sure. But was she that? And like, did people know who she was when this came out?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. If I had to guess, I would say she was probably like well known, but also probably not like the level of like Drew Barrymore in the
Okay.
first movie. You know,
Yeah.
If I had to guess.
Yeah. So because this the thing with her where she's in the opening sort of scene and it's kind of like doing a
Well, deep.
sequel to the first movie in that sense where it's doing the opening kill scene, right?
Yeah, I mean, once we get into spoilers, I really want to talk about this opening scene because it's
Sure.
kind of nuts. But
Yeah. You've got Timothy Olyphant's in there, who you know this is what I knew him from first, but he went on to be the villain in Die Hard 4, and he's been in various other things. You have Jerry O'Connell, who people who watch Sliders know him from Sliders. I never saw Sliders, so I knew him from this.
A big Sliders fan growing up.
Yeah. But
he's in Stand By Me though. That's what people should know him from.
That's true. I saw this long before I saw Stand By Me though. So I mean that's.
So he's also a little kid. Then it's not recognizable. But.
So he's actually one of my biggest problems in the movies. I think his character is dull as shit, and I hate him.
Oh yeah.
Like, he's terrible. He's doing this because they're doing this whole thing where because the boyfriend turned out to be the killer right last time, and we're spoiler free for this movie, but I kind of have to bring up the first one.
Sure.
Like they do this thing where it's like, oh, could he be the killer because he's the boyfriend, and like he almost intentionally acts in a couple of scenes to be as like not mysterious, but as guilty as possible, even though it makes no sense.
Yeah.
Given like what he's actually doing, and there's a scene where like they question if he is suspicious, and he just like he does this thing where he's like, it's just lucky that you or unlucky you got there too late and he got away. Gulp, and it looks like you look like you're in a cartoon, like you're the actual bad guy in a cartoon right now. The way you're acting. And he's also just really bland in this movie. He's what he is, and this is like. Let's just acknowledge right now, Sarah Michelle Gellar is in this movie, who you may know as Buffy Summers from the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But
of course.
this dude is such a Riley. This character, he is Riley from Buffy. Okay. That's who he is.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. Yeah, he's not offensive, but he's not interesting.
Yeah, like, he's just bland as shit. In fact, speaking of people you recognise, the one of the main girls in the sorority house, one of them is from Urban Legend, funnily enough, which also starred Joshua Jackson, who has a small role in this in the film class. The other girl, of course, is Portia de Rosa from Arrested Development when she was younger.
Portia de Rossi?
Is it de Rossi? Yeah, sure. I probably mispronounced it.
I think so.
Yeah, I'll take your word for it. But
yeah, like it is crazy to see her in something that's not Arrested Development.
I know, it's weird. I was like, because it took me a second. I was like, wait, I know her. Oh, it's what's her face from Arrested Development. So yeah, there's a lot of faces. It's full of faces.
And then well, I was gonna say we have one other returning character from the first movie, but I don't know. Is it a spoiler to say who that is? Or... Yeah, I don't know if that's. I mean, giveaway.
Do you know what's weird about that is that in the I think I mentioned this when we talked about the first one, is that there's like one shot of him on the news in the first one, and it is Liev Schreiber. That they had that actor in the first one, and then here he's like obviously got a much bigger role. He pops up quite a few times in this film, and I couldn't help but feel like it's weird that they actually cast an actor they were willing to keep for like a bigger role in the second movie. Because he's a nothing. Because in the first movie, he's a nothing character. He's just backstory. We see him on the news at once, and that's it.
Yeah, and of course, yeah, he has like a bigger role. So again, it's playing with the idea, like, all right, so yeah, he wasn't the killer in the first one, but he did wrongfully go to jail because of Sydney. So could that be a possible motive?
Yeah, is he pissed off? Is he wanting revenge, kind of thing? And obviously all the regulars are back. Can I actually say what one of my favorite things about this movie is?
Sure.
It's that when they were doing their initial edits of the film, they used music from Broken Arrow for Dewey, like his theme in this movie's from Broken Arrow, and they fell in love with it so much that they never bothered writing new music for it. They just got the rights to use the Broken Arrow soundtrack.
Oh, okay.
So
that's cool.
Dun, 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 dun. That's Broken Arrow. And it's worth mentioning, Broken Arrow came out in like 1993 or something like that, maybe 95, something in that range, something in there. So it was only a couple of years old at this point. It was the music they played when John Travolta was like being all villainous in Broken Arrow. That is Dewey's soundtrack in this, and I kind of love that.
That's cool. I don't think I've actually seen Broken Arrow, but
well, it's not a horror movie for Tim, so you wouldn't have seen it.
Of course, of course not. But wait, is Nick Cage in it, or is it just John Travolta?
No, it's John Travolta and Christian Slater. It's in Broken Arrow.
Oh, okay. It's not worth watching then. As you say, if it is a Nick Cage movie, I'll have to check it
Christian
out.
Slater's a good reason to watch a movie.
Okay, I guess.
Come on, the Slater. Come
on. Sure. Well, let's do Hello Man soon. That was Slater, right? Oh wait, was that
Kevin Bacon?
Okay. All these boring white guys.
That was such a weird thing. I was like, yes, we should watch Hollow Man soon. Then I'm like, wait, what? Christian Slater has nothing to do with Hollow Man.
We should probably watch Hollow Man though. That might be a Patreon only episode.
Why?
I don't know, because it feels like that. It's like pretty bad, right?
Is it about an invisible maniac? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So it fit in our model or whatever formula we're doing with that.
I feel like Hollow Man, is one that you could argue is either horror or sci-fi, depending on how you feel. Like, I feel like The Last Act is definitely a horror movie.
All right. Well, fine. Do it on Ace then. I'm
not saying we shouldn't.
I'll avoid that one.
I'm just saying that you could argue it either way. You could argue that it's more of a sci-fi movie. Because I would say classic Invisible Man's a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, well, you could argue it, I guess, but I don't know. I feel like I don't want to separate it from the other Universal monster movies. I feel like it fits with them, and I don't want to make a differentiation between like, all right, all these Universal monsters are horror monsters, but this one is a sci-fi monster.
All right, fine. I'm just saying. So big cast. What's going on cast wise? And like I say, there's too much even, because we have, a
lot of characters.
Yeah, like I say, like the whole the theater stuff, like I don't like at all.
Well, like, yeah, I think maybe like it feels like there's like too much stuff, like because like you have like the film class and then the theater stuff and then the fraternity and sorority stuff. I feel like maybe you could have just picked like one of those things and kind of have that be more of a focus. Probably I would have wanted to go with the film class, because even though it feels like a little I don't know, like pedantic or something, like rewatching it, like I do still like seeing all these movie nerds and stuff fighting about like
what's the best sequel?
Yeah, even though it's just like the kind of shit you see on Twitter all the time now, but like but at the time it was kind of like novel to actually see people in movies talking and referencing other movies and stuff. And especially like knowing more about horror now when you watch it and they mention stuff like I can't think off the top of my head, but like later on the movie when they actually mentioning like like legit like horror movies and stuff, and you're like, oh yeah.
Joe, it's funny actually. There's a scene when Jamie Kennedy, or Randy rather, is on the phone, right, and he's listing off slasher movies, and what's funny watching this now is that I don't know when I last watched this, but I can guarantee you this is the first time I've watched this movie where every single slasher movie he names I've seen.
Oh yeah. Because
he mentions Graduation Day, he mentions Final Exam. Day. He mentions.
Oh yeah, because they're talking about like all like school related ones.
Yeah.
Right. Oh yeah.
And I'm like, I've seen all these. I've literally seen everyone he mentioned. I'm like, whoa, that wasn't true when I first saw this for sure. I never heard of these things.
You know what? I wasn't thinking about it when I watched it yesterday, but there's like the running gag where Timothy Olyphant's character is trying to name sequels that were better than the original.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like missed opportunity, but he never mentions Evil Dead 2, which you think I think. Maybe not everyone, but I think a lot of people would say they like that one better than the first one. But also, there's a connection with Wes Craven.
That's true.
So it feels like that would have been a good one to bring up.
What's weird though is he kind of wins the argument in class though, because he brings up Godfather Part 2, which everyone shuts up and says, yeah, you know what, okay. Although I'm going to be weird here and say I actually prefer the first Godfather, but that's neither here nor there.
I don't even know if I saw Part 2. They're not horror movies. What do you want from me?
Yeah, of course.
I'll watch The Ghoul Father if that ever is a movie.
But what pardon me, hair in my mouth.
Hairball.
Yeah, hairball. This is the cat's fault. But here's
one of these days you are gonna like leave your monitor on. We're just gonna see you cleaning one of your cats in the background.
Dare you? So here's the weird thing though about that gag is that it's in the scene in the classroom, and then there's obviously the one scene later on where he's like, "Hey, by the way, I've got another one, Empire Strikes Back," and Randy says like, "Not a sequel, part of a trilogy, totally planned, completely different," and I'm like, "Piss off." That trilogy was not planned out from the start. Shut up.
Yeah, I did not like that logic. Also, I don't think like even if you plan for a sequel, it's still a sequel. Like, I don't think that's necessarily something that should move it out of the running or whatever.
And I'm not saying that they didn't plan for more, but like it wasn't like they didn't write the whole trilogy before they made the first one. No, like that was not a thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. With that.
Like the only thing that's been planned like that really is like Lord of the Rings. I think the Japanese Samurai trilogy was because that came out 3 years back to back, which would imply that if nothing else, it was made very tightly in one big chunk. But if most trilogies are just movies that have 3 in the series, they're not all planned in advance.
No, and now another thing too. I don't know if. I mean, you're the film asshole here, so you would you'd probably be able to answer this more definitively than me. But like, so when you're talking about like the best sequels or whatever, does that only count number 2s, or like, could you say like a third or a fourth movie? Because it's a sequel in a series of movies or whatever.
It's still sequels.
Okay, because they never bring up anything that's like a third or a fourth or whatever.
I think the point here is that. Well, you could argue there's just not many good ones.
Sure, yeah.
And that's what
typically the further down you go, usually it's not as good. But I was just curious because I don't know if like I feel like sometimes people might like be like, if you're like, oh, like I like my favorite sequel is whatever Dream Warriors or something, and people might be like, well, that's the third one. Like no, right, well, you're just talking about number 2s or whatever.
Yeah, it's a sequel. It's a goddamn sequel.
It's I think technically, like for the meta narrative of this film, since this is Scream 2, it does make sense to just do 2 movies.
Yeah,
but,
well, they're talking about like someone trying to make a real life sequel to their life, right? Because Stab's coming out, so which would make it the second one. So I think there are just here. It just makes sense thematically, like you say, that everything's just the second one.
Yeah.
But yeah, someone should have brought up. I don't know. It's funny. Yeah, there's no Evil Dead 2, but someone does bring up House 2, the second story.
Oh yeah. That's an interesting choice. I'm pretty sure I've seen House 2, but I don't think it really like super stood out to me. Or at least like if it is better, I don't think it's like leaps better.
Well, we'll do it one day and we'll find out. So
that means we're gonna have to do the whole franchise though, which
I'm not saying
3 and 4 get crazy.
Yeah, I'm not saying we start now. I'm so let's cross a few of these off first, and then we'll think about adding House on. So there's a couple of Friends jokes in this one. I feel like the first movie didn't have a lot of jokes about Courtney Cox being from Friends, but there was like the joke that David Schwimmer plays Dewey.
Oh yeah.
And Stab. And then there's a joke later on, like I think Randy says something like, our photos get leaked all over the internet, and she's like, those weren't real, that was my head pasted on Jennifer Aniston's body. They're amusing, like there's whatever. It's one of those things though where I feel like if you show this movie to someone in 20 years, like they might not actually have ever heard of Friends or know who these people are. it's like whatever.
Yeah. They're fine enough. I do feel like this movie does like lean into the comedy a bit more.
It definitely does. See, even just the opening kill, it feels like it's played for more of an animated kind of thing. Like honestly, this is because I think the first movie still tries to be a serious horror film, even though it's doing all this like satire meta stuff. I feel like this one, it kind of goes past the point where it's being less of an actual horror movie, and it's one of those things where when it gets to the fourth movie, but when we get there, when I saw the fourth movie, my initial thought was like, this isn't even trying to be a horror movie anymore. It's not even under the pretense that it's supposed to be suspenseful or it's supposed to be the killer's meant to be intimidating. Like all that is just gone by the fourth movie. This one still has some of it, but there's definitely some of the kill scenes that feel like that's felt like it was more like it was about just the joke of what it was doing rather than the actual like, oh, we're supposed to be tense because the killer's chasing someone or because whatever.
It's interesting. I don't necessarily remember feeling that way about the fourth movie, but I felt like I kind of got that with the third movie a little bit. Because I mean, we'll get there, but to me, like, the third movie really goes off the rails. But
the third, we'll get to the third movie. Yeah, and there's some meta jokes. Like, I like there's a character in this, the camera guy, who literally saves himself by saying that he's just not going to stick around because, you know what? No. Your previous camera guy got killed. Black guys usually die first in this. I'm just going to leave. And then he survives because he leaves. It's actually kind of funny. Like, okay.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, other than that, like, there's just elements. Like, I think the boyfriend sucks. I think the drama club stuff kind of sucks. And I wish we spent more time with the film class, like you said. I wish we spent more time. Maybe actually, like, I feel like Sydney's plot in this feels kind of weird. Like, she oddly had less and less to do in each movie. And I know in the third movie, she could only film for like a week or something like that on them because she had a lot of commitments. So that's why her plot is like so small comparatively compared to before. But even in this one, I felt like we were cutting around so many characters doing different things that it didn't really feel like she was the center of the movie anymore, even though the killers and like why that's happening it still pretends like it is.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. There's like, because there's a whole scene in the middle where like the boyfriend like sings to her. He's up in the cafeteria tables.
Oh yeah, what the hell was that? that like felt so out of place. Very weird.
The whole point is that he feels like she's been thinking of him as suspicious and that she doesn't want to like be like close anymore because of what's going on, and he makes this big gesture of giving her his Greek letters because he's in a fraternity or some bullshit American college tradition, and sings to her. It's this big thing, and it kind of like softens her up a little bit, and she feels better again. And I think it's meant to make us like him. I think that's the point of it.
Sure, yeah.
And maybe it's meant to be the polar opposite of that scene in the first one where like Billy's in the corridor with her and he's like, "It's not me, Sid," and he's like, "Stupid,"
Yeah. Yeah, and that was a dumb scene, honestly. I think really though, like I feel like we've talked about a lot of like scenes and stuff, but the one thing we're not really talking about, and I think that's a detriment to this movie, is like
the kills.
I don't think there's that many great ones, like especially compared to the first one, which like the first one you can rattle off your head like this one. Like this one, it's kind of like you have the big opening scene, and then you have the ending, but in the middle it's kind of like there's not much.
Joe, what's worse about it is at one point when Randy's talking to Dewey and he's like, "Oh yeah, so here's the sequel rules, right?" And he's like, "Oh, this because it's a sequel, you have to do this. It can't be the boyfriend again." Blah blah blah. One of the things he says is that the kills have to be bigger and bloodier. Like, it has to be amped up. It has to outdo the first one. And I feel like it's the opposite. The kills in this are like much weaker and kind of boring compared to the first one.
Yeah, it's strange. I think maybe that's one of the big things that's holding it back. Like, if you kind of maybe focus in on tighten it up a little bit and maybe get some better kills in there, it could have been like really cool. But I'll also say I think we're kind of edging towards spoilers. So I'll just say kind of before we get there, the other thing I'm not crazy about is I really don't like the ending. I think it's kind of stupid, but I mean, again, going back to what I kind of talking about in the beginning, like I'm not sure if it's supposed to be stupid because it's making a commentary on like, oh, aren't sequels ridiculous? Like, look at this kind of really ham-fisted forced thing, or if it is like genuinely supposed to be like, oh, isn't this a surprise? Like, crazy, huh? Like, you know what I mean? I'm not really sure. Either way, I don't love it.
I think it's missing the atmosphere of the first one as well. I feel like there's something lost in, I don't know, almost because the characters are like, oh, it's happening again, and we're kind of scared about it, but like, it's like, as much as it's funny having Sydney waking up and someone calls her and says, "What's your favorite scary movie?" and she's like, oh, she's got caller ID, and she's like, "Oh, hey Evan, whatever, this is your number."
That was funny.
That's funny on its own, but I almost get that feeling throughout the whole movie where the mystique's kind of gone. Like,
sure, yeah.
It just kind of feels like we're going through kind of the motions to an extent. So we'll do spoilers then. So full spoilers. I'm just, my cat's distracting me over the side. Full spoilers for Scream 2. I want to talk about how so Dewey and Gale have their chemistry still, and I think their chemistry still there. Every time they interact in this movie, I kind of like the scenes. I like him sticking up for himself and being kind of stern with her.
And I think in terms of I guess technically not a kill scene, but maybe like one of my favorite like killer scenes is the one like with them
In the soundproofed area. Yeah, no,
I thought that was pretty cool.
That's really good because he's behind the glass and she can't hear him because everything's sound treated. Because they're in like the audio visual building on the campus, and given them it's like a film class, it makes sense that all this stuff is here. But actually, this is one of my weird nitpicks of this whole thing is like, okay, so I like their relationship, I like their chemistry, and like her trying to apologize. It's all good stuff. So they basically have this idea that our cameraman has been filming a lot of like crowd footage throughout all the various moments in the film. Is like, hey, if the killer's always watching, they might be on the footage. So they literally have a quest here at this point to find like a VCR and a TV to watch the footage on, and I'm like, this is 1997. It's not that hard to find a VCR and a TV, and they end up having to go into the film and TV side of the school and get like a TV in there, and I'm like, where are you two staying? You don't have like a VCR. I mean, I know they're not living in obviously at hotels right now, but you're telling me your hotel room doesn't have a VCR and a TV? One of you?
I didn't think about that, but that is kind of crazy. Like,
it's just weird.
Yeah, at that time, like I had my own TV in my room, and it's not like my family wasn't rich or anything. Like,
yeah, it's weird because it changes to nighttime before they actually get to it, because it goes to like this exterior shot, and it's like they've been looking for a while, and it felt weird to me. I'm like, what? Why is this so hard? Just
yeah.
TVs and VCRs are pretty plentiful, especially in '97.
Yeah. Yeah, that definitely shouldn't have been too crazy.
It was weird. It was weird. But you're right. Out of the horror kind of moments, that was probably my favorite stuff. Was like them sneaking around the soundproof areas, because that was kind of interesting. And I get what it's doing at the ending, where Sidney kind of defeats the killers by literally using like the fake sets and stuff. It's just like using the art itself to fight back when the killers in both movies so far have used slasher movies as their main weapon, right? She's using literal like theater props and the fake walls and everything to like hurt the killer. So I guess we have to talk about who the killer is, and like know.
A quick question. I do wonder though if that is supposed to be like some type of commentary as to like being like, oh, like live theater trumps movies or something like that.
I don't think so. I think it's just purely about her using like art to fight back, essentially, kind of thing. So much like the first film, we have two killers, which is fine. It felt weird to me to do two killers again, but whatever. Here's my problem.
Because that's like a surprise in the first one.
It was, yeah. In this one, it was like, oh, two of them again. Okay. Yeah. I think they tried to make it interesting because when we find out who the first killer is, he kind of tries to imply that it might be Derek, the boyfriend, and then it's implied for a second that it's Gale, even though we know as the audience it's not Gale because she was running from the killer like 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
So here's my problem with the killers in Scream 2. Now, I really like Laurie Metcalf. I think she actually does a really good performance when she does come out as one of the killers.
Yeah, I think she's a great in general. Like I'm always happy to see her. She always
Lady Bird. She was great in Lady Bird. She's a great actress. Her and Timmy Elephant, who both turned out to be the killers, their characters are so minor in this movie that it just kind of feels like he isn't as surprising because it was minor. Like why isn't Cotton the killer? That would actually have been more interesting.
No, yeah, I agree. It's like well, I mean, I don't know necessarily. I kind of do like being a good guy, but yeah, probably would have been more interesting. But
if not Cotton, someone else. Like, there's so much theorizing it could be any of the characters from the first movie, and I feel like the characters in this, it's like, hey, they're so minor that you never saw them coming, and I'm like, well, yeah, because it's uninteresting because they are just these minor characters in the background.
Yeah. Like it feels like it's just a surprise just to be a surprise versus the first one where it feels like, oh, there's a legitimate like reason and thought put into why these people are doing this.
Yeah, because right. in the first movie it was like, okay, sure, Matthew Lillard was maybe a little bit smaller, but he felt like a bigger character in Scream 1 than either of these two did in Scream 2.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And then Billy's like the second main character. So,
Yeah.
prominent characters be turned out to be the killers, and like, it turns out that she's Billy's mother, right? And I'm like, okay, that's fine. That's a fine motive for what she's doing. But I'm like, and obviously you then think, okay, so Sydney, as soon as she sees her, knows who it is, right? And I'm like, well, why didn't you hint at it earlier in the film? Why not have a moment in the film where she like intentionally avoids Sydney, right? And have it be something we kind of notice but don't really understand why. And then we get to this point and it's like, oh no, it's because Sydney would recognize her immediately and know who she is.
Yeah.
But it never really did it to that. So it's like, okay, you've done that, but like, I don't know. And yeah, I don't know. It's weird because it feels like it's trying to do bigger things and how wacky it is, but everything feels actually more muted in the first film. Like, because once again, both killers have guns, right? But seeing the end of the first film and Billy and whatever Matthew Lillard's character was called, Dewey, not Dewey. That's this Dewey. Oh god, what his character name?
I completely forget. What his name was.
There's a point where they're like stabbing each other and shooting each other, and they're just covered in blood, and it feels like we're going down madness. It feels like chaos is unleashed, and like we're really descending into their like psychotic nature. Here, it just kind of there's a couple of gunshots, and it kind of feels lukewarm. Like it doesn't feel like anything really severe is really happening. Also, Dewey is like the Terminator apparently, because he is now been like killed in both movies, but shown up at the end alive.
They said like, oh, luckily, like they stabbed him in some scar tissue or something. I'm like, does that make much of a difference? I don't know. Like, but I feel like in the first movie, like Matthew Lillard's character, like if you go back and watch it, like you can kind of see that he's like kind of crazy and unhinged and stuff. Like this, it definitely feels like more of a switch with Timothy Olyphant, where like it's like he seems like pretty normal throughout the movie, like until the end. It just seems like all of a sudden, oh wait, no, now I'm like super crazy.
Yeah, and I'm going to blame it on the movie set. It's all about the trial, baby. It's all about the trial. And it really felt like he was just a shitty version of Matthew Lillard's character, because that line, it's all about the trial, just reminded me of these days, Sid, you got to have a sequel. Like it reminded me of that line so much, and I was like, it just feels like we're doing kind of the same thing again. So yeah, like, as much as like I don't hate this movie, and is like because the other big set piece I'd argue is probably when the two detectives who are bodyguarding Sid are trying to take her out of town, and the car crashes after the killer attacks. And
that could have been. You really don't need this scene.
And we have this scene where Sydney and her roommate have to sneak out the car, but because it's a cop car and there's like a cage up and the back doors won't open, they have to crawl through the hole in the cage and then sneak past over the killer's lap to get out the window. And I do this, and it's a fine set piece in terms of concept. Like, you have to sneak past the killer without waking him up. And I'm like, okay, they've made sure they've got no weapons, so because otherwise you just stab him, right? You just stab the killer while he's sitting there. And of course the killer does some fancy teleporting moves here because he's not there anymore, because Sydney has to know who it is, and then her roommate gets stabbed.
It's like I feel I completely forgot about this scene. Like a lot of the stuff I felt like was like really memorable. Like even before watching this again, it'd been a while, but I still remember the opening scene and the ending, and like Randy getting pulled into the van and stuff. Like this whole, like you said, the movie is like 2 hours. Like you definitely could have cut some stuff, and I feel like maybe this scene didn't really need to be there that much.
I think what's weird about it is, just from a pacing point of view, is I feel like you have the whole stuff with Dewey and Gale, and then it kind of cuts to Sydney after that, and we're with her for a long time. She, after this scene, she runs to the theater, and then we get this whole thing that plays out over like 15 minutes of like, first it's Timothy Olyphant, and then he introduces the other killer, and then he gets shot by Billy's mom, and then we have more monologues, and it's like, your mother took my husband, and then you took my son. I'm gonna kill you. Blah 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 blah. And I think I think Laurie Metcalf's good, because she's a great actress. She's given it all she's got, and she makes it far more interesting than what it would be otherwise. And again, but there's something about Scream 2 and about who the killers are and why they're doing it, and just the kills themselves. It all feels a little bit undercooked to me. It all feels kind of like we had to make a sequel quickly. we churned this out in a year, and this is what we came up with.
Yeah, it feels like you just maybe need a little more polish, maybe a little bit more balance between, like you mentioned before the first one, it is a meta horror movie, but it's also still like just works on its own as a good slasher, which I feel like maybe this could have used a little bit more balance between like like still make it like a good decent horror movie, but also have that meta sequel idea in there, and it just feels like at times it's just leaning more into like one or the other. Like
Yeah, do you know what I thought was annoying actually is that I feel like there's some actually good ideas in here for like sort of mechanical evolutions of the concepts, right? Like the scene where like he phones Randy and he's with Gail and he's with Dewey, and it's like, hey, like whoever this, because they know someone's watching them, right? Because they can see them. It's like, okay, someone in the campus right now in this outdoor area, the killer's here on the phone somewhere, and so they split up and try and find whoever the killer is, right? And I'm like, this is a neat concept. From a conceptual point of view, I can see how this scene plays out and works. This idea that they know the killer's around on a phone, they're looking for the killer. They kind of play a little bit later on in the library because someone like Cindy's computer says, "I'm going to die tonight."
They get that old ass like I am screen.
Yeah, and like I feel like there was more to do here. There was more to develop here, and like, okay, now we know how the killer operates and the rules from the first film. Like, flip it on its head. Like, it makes jokes about sequels and it points out like what sequels do and how this is going to kind of one up it. But I feel like it never actually goes far enough in terms of like, I feel like I want the meta stuff to go further and be cleverer, but I also want it to be more of a horror movie at the same time. And I get that maybe sounds like I'm asking for something impossible, but I don't think it is. I think that
no, it's. Yeah, I mean, well, that's probably. I didn't realize they came out so close together. I mean, that's probably what you get when you have to like rush something, a year after. But yeah, it definitely doesn't feel like as clever as it should be.
No, and I hate to just compare it to Cabin in the Woods, but I think Cabin in the Woods is such a wonderful film because it does all these things, and Cabin in the Woods is definitely less of a straight up horror movie because it is such a high concept in what it's doing, right? It's it's this idea of these people in a lab watching what's going on and stuff. But like that movie, like devotes itself to every idea it has. Like every idea it has is explored to the fullest extent. Whereas this, it feels like it's just kind of skimming the surface of the sequel stuff, as opposed to really delving into it full force.
Yeah, instead of actually like legitimately going for it, it feels like maybe more like fan servicey stuff. Like, oh, since Randy has the horror movie rules in the first one, we're gonna have him give the sequel rules in this one, which is like a cool thing, but it feels like less of a interesting meta commentary and more of just a beat that we're just redoing from the first one.
Yeah. And it's funny because obviously Randy gets killed, and that's fine. But what's weird though is I think because they kind of make it look like Dewey's been killed off and then bring him back, it really makes it feel like they don't have the balls to like kill him off. But I can't say they don't have the balls to kill anyone off in the first movie because Randy's still there. But it's something that becomes a problem going forward because typically the people from the first movie are pretty safe. Randy's the exception to that rule.
Yeah. That's kind of another problem is they introduce a lot of new characters, but I mean, like you already kind of mentioned it, but it's like none of them actually really get that much like time to shine or anything. Like especially when you have really good, interesting people like Sarah Michelle Gellar. Like that must have been like a pretty big name at the time. Like
I mean, this was late 1997. Because not quite yet. This came out.
Like Buffy would have just been like the year before.
But Buffy started March 1997. This came out in December 97.
Oh, okay.
So Buffy would have been about 9 episodes into season 2. So I don't know how big she would have been in terms of like household name by that point.
Fair. But like she really doesn't have like anything to do in this movie.
Yeah, no, she doesn't. She has one scene in the film class, and she's quite good in the film class scene. It's funny because even her dialogue feels like they're trying to do Buffy speak at one point because she says something like, "Oh, those two broke up like 2 episodes ago," and I'm like, that felt like a really Buffy line to me. Maybe it's just because it's her and the way she says it, but like that was a Buffy line. And you know, she's just there, so we have a kill scene at the the 25-minute mark. We had a kill scene here, so because right after this, Sydney gets a call in the house, and I suppose yes, the fact that Cece's been killed clears out the sorority house because they all leave to go check what's going on. But like, did you really need that right before this scene where the killer calls Sydney? Why couldn't Sydney just be on her own, kind of thing?
Yeah.
I guess maybe it's saying that even when she's surrounded by a crowd of people, she's still in danger. But
yeah,
it never really feels like it makes that point. It just kind of happenstance. And then we get it's the boyfriend section of the film. Yeah, I think I guess if I was to round out my feelings on Scream 2, it's just that it's perfectly serviceable and there's a lot of fun moments in it, but ultimately it's a really bland film.
Mm-hmm.
I think bland's the word I'd use to describe it overall. Not bad, but just bland.
Yeah. I think that's fair. Like it does some interesting stuff, but it's just it's just lacking. I kind of want more, and it's been a while since I watched it, so I was actually I was excited to rewatch it because I didn't remember like super hard what my feelings were, and again, like recently I feel like I've heard people saying like, no, like Scream 2 is like really really good, and so I was like, oh cool. And then watching it was just like, again, it's it's definitely not bad. I did have fun with it, but I was kind of hoping for a little bit more. One thing actually do want to talk about real quick is the opening scene. We really haven't touched upon, but let me ask you something. If this is what going to the movies was like, would you ever go to the movies?
No,
again.
I would never go to the movies if it was like this. It's like they go to this movie theater and there's people like just running around in costumes, screaming up and down the aisles, and
I have so many questions. So I mean, first of all, like and I live in Los Angeles, so I have gone to like like a decent amount of like sneak preview events and stuff where they want people to get hyped, but never anything where they're like giving out like full masks and props and want people to put them on and chase each other around and pretend to like kill each other. And it is just like, so like I hate whenever anyone is talking during a movie. This would like drive me insane if there was ever a theater experience like this.
Oh yeah, I'd hate this. This would be dire for me. Joe, this opening scene is really weird actually, because like there's a couple of moments where it feels like it gets kind of just cartoony.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
There's a moment where Jada Pinkett Smith sort of leans over to her date and says, "You want some popcorn?" It's actually not even her date. It's after the date's been killed, and it's the killer in the mask, pretending to be him. And it felt like such a cartoony line to me. I think her death's really bad as well. Like see when she goes up and climbs up in front of the screen, and she kind of slowly dies in front of everyone, and they're all kind of staring. I don't know, like something about it just feels off.
It's really strange, and I have so many questions. Like I want to know, is this like opening night, or has this been out for a while and people like are in love with this masked serial killer? Because it seems like people are.
It's a special preview. Does it say that? Because like they say that at one point.
Okay, because the way like people are donning the mask and running around as this killer, like it seems like people are treating him like there's some like beloved horror icon or something, which I just think is like really weird for people that have never seen this movie before. Also, it's like, it's one thing if you're putting on a hockey mask and pretending to be Jason, but these are based on like what would probably have been a huge real life news story. So it does feel weird to people be like, that would be like if like a couple of years after like Jeffrey Dahmer or something, like they did a Dahmer movie and people were dressing up like him and running around and being like it seems like so like something people wouldn't do.
Yeah, and then like I can forgive some of this for the satire side of it, where it's sort of taking it to the extreme, and like, but I almost feel like the more like the more impactful kind of like scene here might have been that no one did realize this was real. That because at one point someone says, "Oh, they thought it was a publicity stunt or something like that." The idea that they would let this dead woman just lie there and not know what was going on and just cheer that she's dying or something like that actually make more of a dramatic point, I think. And
Well, yeah, I think that it's just so over the top that because I think it's a great like an awesome idea to, since it is like meta and everything, that to start this as like the opening for the movie, but yeah, it's just kind of so over the top. It doesn't really work, I think, as well as it should have. Like again, if you are going for a more comedic, over the top, satirical kind of thing, it's fine. But again, if you want to do something that's like meta, but also still like a generally good slasher movie, I think they could have dialed it back and made it a lot better.
yeah, and
one thing that actually bothers me about it too, I don't know if this stood out to you, but like this crowd is so like crazy and rambunctious and everything. And then at one point, like Jada says something like, she like screams at the screen like, "Ooh, like don't go there" or something, and like everyone turns around and like looks angry at her.
I know because she spoke.
But it's like everyone is throwing popcorn, jumping out of their seats, pretending to kill people, and like you're gonna get mad at the one person that like spoke up during the movie. Like that was insane that like they
yeah, that was weird. It's because she was being negative. She was criticizing it, so they're all like, don't criticize the movie.
How dare you don't like this real life killer.
Go watch the Sandra Bullock film.
Yeah. And then do we ever find out the reason why they were killed? Like, is it just
their names? Because everyone's got a name that they share with someone in the first movie. Although, to be honest, that plot point's kind of just dropped after they bring it up and realize that that's what's happening.
Oh wow, that completely blew past me. I don't think I even noticed that.
The scene in the police station where they point out that it's a copycat because Cece's real name is Casey. There was a character in the first named Casey. Jada's name was Maureen. Maureen Prescott. And the boyfriend was Stevens, I think, which was like it was all like the same names as characters in the first movie. But after after that scene, it's irrelevant. It never really comes up again or matters for the whole movie.
Yeah, that's crazy. I completely forgot about that.
Because had they kept going with that might have been interesting. It was like, okay, now we have an idea who might be targeted because of their names, and like how do we tackle that? But after that point, it didn't matter. It just continued as a normal, kills after people movie. It makes that didn't make a whole lot of sense now that I think about it. you introduce this idea that they're targeting people with those names, and then you just kind of after that forget about it. It's actually kind of weird.
Yeah,
I don't know. I feel like I've sounded really negative, and it's because I think it has got a lot of problems. I don't think it's a terrible movie. I think it's perfectly watchable, but it's kind of lacking the bite the first one did, and I think it. I said it was bland, and I kind of say that because I feel like it's lacking the atmosphere that the first one had. One final thing I do want to mention though is Cotton, like he comes in at the end and kind of saves the day, but there's kind of a standoff where like Billy's mom's like hiding behind Sydney, and she's saying, "Hey, just let me kill her. She put you in prison for a year. Let me kill her, and then we can talk about what we'll do after." And he's basically looks like he's being convinced, and then Sydney says, "Oh, that Diane Sawyer interview you wanted to do, consider it done." And then he shoots the bad guy, and I'm like, and he kind of claims afterwards, like, "I would never hurt you. I wasn't actually being serious there." And I'm like, I don't know. Nothing about it actually feels like you weren't being serious. Everything about it feels like you were going along with the killer for a split second because that was going to get you what you want. And there's almost like the ending of Sydney's arc is that she says, "Hey, don't talk to me, Press. Go talk to Cotton. He's the real hero." And I'm like, I guess there's a way to sell this to me. You tell me that she never really apologized to him for putting him in prison for a year, right? And the arc of this movie is that at the end, she makes it clear to the press because she's never done an interview. She's turned everyone down. She doesn't want to talk about it in public, but she talks in public just to sort of clear his name and say, "Hey." Like and not even that he's a hero, just that he's not a killer, he's not a bad guy. I made a mistake, right? If the movie's arc was to build up to her finally saying that in public, because she kind of owed him that at the very least. Like, hey, I obviously she didn't do it maliciously. She genuinely believed what she believed, but she's like, if the movie was about her like kind of like publicly apologizing to him or giving him a boost. But even right after she does that, he's like, there's a time and a price for everything, journalists. It's like, I don't know. I feel like don't make him so like sleazy and
yeah, it could have been more likable for sure.
Make him a bit more likable so that I care that she's forgiven him. And then it feels like at the end it's like just like an afterthought. It's not like the movie feels like it's been building up to this point. That's not her arc. What is her arc in this movie?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because it's she kind of it's harder.
I mean, you can say she has none. I mean, that is.
I'm not convinced she has none. I think it's really murky. I think it's going in a lot of directions. One could be you could say she's getting over her fear, and whatever. But it feels kind of murky that's if you even suggest that, because I don't think everything adds up in that sense. You could suggest that it's about her learning to trust people again. But the problem is at the start of the movie, like she does trust her boyfriend. It's not until after the doubt comes in, because it's kind of suspicious, that she starts to doubt him, and then they play with that a little bit at the end. But I don't know. It's murky.
Yeah, they could have definitely done more with her, but
yeah, because if that was a central arc, is the idea of building up to actually forgiving Cotton, like properly and publicly, like you could do something with that. You could do with this, like her accepting her culpability in what happened to him. As much as it's understandable and you don't think she's awful for it, like her accepting that could be maybe like an interesting arc for a movie. As it is, it's, I don't know. It's a sequel. It's got a lot of ideas and a lot of them feel undercooked.
It's like like I also don't want to come off as being like too negative, because like overall I do enjoy it and I do have fun watching it and stuff, but like it's just one of those things where like you're almost disappointed in it because you're like, I feel like you could have done better.
I feel like Sydney's plot is actually the least interesting thing about the movie.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Because Dewey and Gale and even Randy, I think they're all the more interesting characters, and which is weird saying that, because I should love Scream 3 because of that, because there's less Sydney and more of them. But Scream 3, you'll hear my thoughts when we get to it, but it ain't going to be positive.
Maybe.
I promise you that. So it's weird. It's weird. Scream 2. It's okay. Scream 2 is the definition of it's an okay sequel.
Sure. Yeah, can't argue with that.
What are you rating Scream 2, Tim?
It is kind of tough. Because I was thinking like that. I don't think I can go as high as a 7, but I don't want to go super low. So I don't know. I'm kind of like trying to think between like a 6 or a 6.5. I think for now I'll just go with a straight 6. It is good. I do enjoy it more than I dislike it, but again, it's a letdown with the first one, and there's stuff they really could have done better with, and again, it just interesting sequel ideas, but just never feels like it goes as far enough as it could have.
I was thinking between a 5.5 and a straight 6. That was kind of where I had my kind of thoughts on it. I don't know, like there's something about Scream 2 that I've just always felt was kind of bland, and while I appreciate some of the sequel stuff it does, I don't think it does enough with it and gets inventive enough. So I'm going to say it is a perfectly watchable 5.5. There we go. So that's super high ratings, and I'm willing to bet you money that Scream 3 is going to be lower. So we'll see that next time we come back to the Scream franchise. But that has been Scream 2, so by all means let us know what you think of Scream 2 in the comments below, like and subscribe, all that stuff. Guys on the Twitters at Screams Midnight for your Screams After Midnight banter, horror movie news, and general horror chatter. You can go do that. If you want to support us and support the show and the channel and everything we do here, head over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, where you can support us for as little as $1 per month, and you can get a bonus episode once per month. You also get to vote on movies in the $5 tier, but you get a bonus episode once a month in the $1 tier. So that'll just cost you $1, and however many episodes are already out, because we started doing that in like April this year. So there'll probably be like at least 3 episodes there by now for your $1. So go have a look at that stuff. And if I'm promoting anything else, it's worth mentioning we have other movie shows, of course. Not with Tim. Tim's a Streams exclusive, but you can get me and Connor talking about various random movies on 121 in Flux, and you can get me and Tara talking about science fiction movies on the Atomic Cinema Experiment, aka the ACE. So go and check out those 2 podcasts if you're interested in more movie content from MailFuzz. But otherwise, keep it here for your scary, spooky horror movies. And one day I'll actually think of an outro catchphrase for streams. It's weird. We're over 300 episodes, Tim, and I've still not thought of one. But that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, guys. We'll see you next time.